All right, welcome to the Explainer. So you're getting ready for that big AWS interview, right? The pressure is definitely on. Well, today we're going to break down the core concepts that always pop up. We're talking about turning that tricky tech jargon into answers you can deliver with confidence. The goal? To help you walk in there totally prepared and hopefully walk out with that job offer.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to build this up logically, piece by piece. First, we'll cover the global infrastructure, the actual physical world of AWS. Then, we'll get into the core service pillars, the main tools. After that, we'll see how to automate and scale everything up. And finally, we'll wrap up with the really important stuff: monitoring, cost, and security.
All right, first things first, we gotta lay the groundwork. It's super easy to get lost talking about virtual servers and all this cloud storage stuff. But here's a little secret. A really common way people trip up in interviews is not knowing where the cloud physically lives. So let's make sure that's not you.
And this is it. This is a classic opening question. An interviewer loves to ask this to see, right off the bat, if you've got a handle on the fundamentals. It sounds so simple, right? Where does the cloud live? But trust me, your answer tells them a lot about how deep your knowledge really goes.
And here you go. This is the answer. The cloud isn't just, floating up in the sky. It's very real. It's a massive network of super secure physical data centers. And what AWS does is organize them into these big geographic regions. Think of major spots on the map, like Northern California or Mumbai.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and it's a key distinction: the difference between a region and an availability zone, or AZ. The easiest way to think about it is this. A region is like a whole city, and inside that city you have multiple AZs, which are like totally separate, isolated data centers. They even have their own power and networking. So if one of them has an outage, boom, the others are still up and running. This right here is the secret sauce for building apps that just don't go down.
All right, so now that we've got the physical map down, it's time to open up the AWS toolbox. We're going to look at the core services now. These are the absolute essential building blocks you'll use for pretty much everything you do in the cloud. When you really boil it all down, almost every single thing you build in AWS rests on these three pillars. You've got your computing power, you've got your storage for all your data, and you've got the networking to connect everything together. Seriously, if you can master these three concepts, you are way ahead of the game.
So let's kick it off with computing. And we have to talk about the absolute workhorse of AWS, EC2. That's Elastic Compute Cloud. I mean, it's basically like having a virtual server on demand. You can spin one up, set it up how you like, and use it whenever you want for as long as you want. Gone are the days of buying and physically racking servers in a data center.
Next up is storage, and for that we have S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service. Just think of it like a bottomless hard drive in the cloud. You can throw anything in there: files, images, videos, you name it. It's built for insane scale, and you gotta hear this, it has what's called 11 nines of durability. That's 99.99999999999%. It means your data is ridiculously safe.
So, okay, if S3 is that infinite file cabinet, where does EBS fit in? EBS is Elastic Block Store. The best way to picture this is as the dedicated, super-fast hard drive that's attached directly to your EC2 server. It's basically the C drive for your virtual machine.
And here's the crucial difference, so listen up. S3 is for objects, files you can get to from anywhere. EBS, on the other hand, is a block-level file system that's virtually tied to one single EC2 instance. It's what you need to run your operating system. Knowing when to use S3 versus EBS, that's a guaranteed interview question. And that brings us to our third pillar, networking. This is where the VPC, or Virtual Private Cloud, comes into play. What this service does is let you create your own logically isolated, private little slice of the AWS cloud. It's your own virtual network where you have complete control over who gets in and who doesn't.
Okay, so we've got our tools from the toolbox, right? We have EC2 for compute, S3 and EBS for storage, and VPC for networking. Now let's talk about putting it all together to build and scale your apps efficiently, because honestly, this is where AWS just blows everything else out of the water, building a fully automated assembly line for your infrastructure.
And at the very heart of that automation is a service called CloudFormation. So instead of sitting there, manually clicking through the web console to create dozens of different resources, which is slow and error-prone, by the way, CloudFormation lets you define your entire setup. I'm talking servers, databases, networks, everything, as a simple text file. This is what we call infrastructure as code.
And this diagram just shows the magic perfectly. All you do is write a template that describes what you want. You hand that template over to CloudFormation, and poof, AWS goes and builds everything for you, automatically and in the right order. The beauty of this is that it's repeatable, it's reliable, and it pretty much gets rid of any chance for human error.
The real power here, though, is that you can tear down and rebuild an entire complex environment in minutes, not hours or days. That level of consistency and speed is an absolute best practice in the industry, and it's definitely something that interviewers will be listening for you to talk about. But okay, what about this? This is another classic scenario question you'll get. What happens when your app suddenly goes viral and your traffic just explodes unexpectedly? How do you handle all that success without wasting a ton of money on servers that are just sitting around doing nothing most of the time? And here's the beautiful, elegant answer: autoscaling. This is the magic that's constantly watching your application's traffic and its performance. When traffic spikes, it automatically adds more servers to handle the load. And then, when things get quiet again, it gets rid of those extra servers, so you only ever pay for the exact compute power you're actually using. It's brilliant. All right, so your application is built, it's automated, it can scale up and down to meet whatever demand you throw at it. That's awesome, but building it is really only half the battle. Now, we need to step into the control room and see how we're going to manage, monitor, and protect this whole thing.
And for that, we have Amazon CloudWatch. This is your single pane of glass. It's your main dashboard for literally everything happening in your AWS account. CloudWatch gives you all the data, real-time metrics, logs, on everything from your server's CPU usage to how many API calls are being made. It's how you keep your finger on the pulse of your system.
Now, an interviewer is almost certainly going to ask you about cost. And when they do, they're not just testing your tech knowledge. They want to see if you think like a business person. So mentioning these specific tools, using Cost Explorer to analyze spending, setting up AWS budgets for alerts, and using cost allocation tags to track who's spending what, that shows them you know how to be smart and responsible with money in the cloud.
Okay, let's talk security. One of the biggest and most common threats any app on the internet is going to face is a DDoS attack. You've probably heard of it. It's basically a malicious, overwhelming flood of traffic that's designed to create a giant traffic jam and knock your service offline. So the big question is, what does AWS do to help you with that?
Well, the solution from AWS is this really powerful, multi-layered defense. A great way to think about it is that services like AWS Shield and Route 53 are like the bouncers at the front door of your nightclub. They stand guard, and they absorb and filter out all the bad traffic, the riffraff, before it can even get close to your actual application servers, which are tucked away safely inside your private network, your VPC.
So you know how to build it, how to scale it, how to protect it. But what about the keys to the kingdom? Who gets access? And this brings us to the crucial difference between an IAM user and an IAM role. Now let me be clear, this isn't just some random trivia question. Really understanding the difference between a person logging in versus a service needing permission and why that distinction is the absolute cornerstone of a secure cloud environment, well, that's what separates a good engineer from a truly great one. And that's the final thought I'll leave you with.